SABC News presentation.
Good evening and welcome to Interface. My name is Thembi Samachele. The ongoing debate on land reform has taken yet another turn, with government's proposal to allocate 50% of commercial farms to farm workers. The proposal is being criticized by farmers and also other interest groups. And there is agreement, however, in the need to share the land and also to empower farming communities. But the question seems to be around how that should be done. Our guests tonight are Agrima Anjana, who is with the African Farmers Association of South Africa. And also in our Sea Point studios in Cape Town, we've got Annalise Crosby, who is with Agri SA. And we are also joined by Johan Jacobs, who is with Hogan Lovells, a law firm also dealing with land and property rights. Thank you very much to all of you and welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you.
So let me just see, in a nutshell, have I got this correct? That government is saying it wants to buy half of the farms for the farm workers, but not give the money to the farmers, keep it in a fund and use that money to help them be better managers and also help the farms to improve. Is that correct?
That's the way the proposal reads at the moment, yes.
It sounds noble. What would anybody have a problem with there?
I don't have a problem with that. I have a problem with how you implement it in practice, and I looked at it purely from a conveyancing, a property perspective as to, let's assume it does happen, how do we then manage it through the registration process?
But before we get to that, just from the outside looking in, from a political perspective, would this equate to land expropriation without compensation, in your view?
If you read the part of the opt-out, there's an opt-out in the actual clause that deals with the payment that doesn't go to the farmer. It gets held in the trust, and then it is used to assist the new farmer coming into the process. I would believe that however you colour in a definition of that word expropriation, if you don't get something for something you lose, you probably could see it as an expropriation.
All right, let's bring in Agrima Anjana, who is with the African Farmers Association of South Africa. But Agri, looking at the way that land redistribution, let's call it that, in the past has been done, has government in particular been patient with farmers enough? Has government done what it needed to try and get the land back from the farmers, for the farm workers in particular, in the correct manner, in your view?
Well, I'm not going to bring the issue of farm workers in particular. I'm going to bring the element of redistributing the land to the people. Over the past 20 years, government have tried its best, but unfortunately, if you look at the 7% or 7.5% of land that had been distributed over the 20 years, when I calculated the number of years, the problem is the pace. If the government can go with the current pace, it will take them 103 years to say, I've now distributed what I wanted to. 103 years.
What has contributed to that? Have the farmers been resisting?
Well, it has been one of that. There are a couple. There are the range of factors that have made this process to be so slow. One of them, from the government point of view, is that the farmers were resisting to hand over the land. And there was also the issue of price. I think the prices were ridiculous, were very high. And there was also the issue of bureaucratic system within the government itself, that the applications were cumbersome. It takes almost 2 years, 3 years sometimes to finish the process. Those were the problems. I think Minister Nkwinti was trying to address these things by putting specific institutions like the Office of Valuer General, which was going to address the issue of land prices.
Is the proposal on the table the correct solution? in your view?
Well, from the AFASA point of view, we don't agree with this proposal. It's a total new policy which was never been on the table. I mean, we supported Minister Nkwinti on the green paper, where he had the certain elements, which was talking about the Office of the Valuer General, which was talking about the Office of Land Management Commission. We agreed with that, and that was going to a little bit fast track the process. But all of a sudden, without consulting anybody, he just came up with a bombshell, which to us is not going to work.
Let's say this, that we did invite Minister Nkwinti and a representative from his department, but they were not able to join us for this discussion. It would have been great to have them articulate their point of view, but we've got to just have to do without them. But Annalise Crosby is with Agri SA. She joins us from our Seapoint studios. Annalise, one of the things that the minister has said is that black people in South Africa have really bent over backwards on the question of land. Would you agree with that statement?
Look, I think one needs to realize a couple of things. First of all, land reform is very complex. International experience shows that. But our government has done very poorly in implementing the land reform program. And it's easy to now blame the landowners or to say that black people have bent over backwards, because government is the implementing agent. And from where we stand, the real problem has been a very poor implementation of the policies and programs that are in place. You only need to look at how many...
Let's look at that implementation. Sorry? And let me ask you the question that I asked Mr. Manjan. Government coming to the farm owners and saying, willing buyer, willing seller, come to us, let's buy the land from you. And then you had many of the farmers coming up with ridiculous amounts of money that were making it impossible for government to buy this land from them. Would you say then that it's still the government that's to blame for the problems with this process?
Well, you know, that is based on perception. It's not actually based on fact as far as we're concerned. There was overpayment in some instances, but government had the power to expropriate, which it for some reason chose never to use. So it had that power all along. There were many instances where farmers and estate agents on behalf of farmers actually offered large tracts of land to government, and government didn't take them up on the offer. So there's no shortage of land on the market. And one really needs to look at the statistics as to what was paid for the land in restitution for some time. There was payment in excess of market value, but in redistribution, the studies pointed to it that for a long time, the average prices in redistribution was 30% less than the market value of the farms that were bought. So we really need to talk about fact and not about perception.
All right, let's take a short break at the moment and welcome your thoughts as well. You can drop us a line on our Facebook page. It's Interface on SABC3, and also on Twitter at Interface on SABC or at Tembisa Magele. To stay with us. So we're talking about the contentious issue of land reform, and in particular the proposal on the table from Rural Development Minister Kugile Nkwinti, and just some of the uproar that has come as a result of that. I see some of your Facebook messages also very mixed, some in support and some not so. But let's hear from our guests, talking to Mr. Agrima Hanjana, who is with the African Farmers Association of South Africa, Annalise Crosby from Agri SA, joining us from our Seapoint studio, and Johan Jacobs, who is from the law firm Hogan Lovells. Now, let me ask you this, Johan. If you were the government and you had said, willing buyer, willing seller, and got, from what we heard earlier, some people trying to extort money from you, essentially, and the process is as slow as 107 years or however long it's going to take to actually get some redress, what would you do?
I think mention has been made of expropriation, and the government has those rights. It's entrenched. They can do that. where there's an extortion to the extent that the farmer is asking more than what the actual prices are in the area, because there are various ways of valuing property. There's ways of looking at what were farms sold for on an arm's length basis in the process over the past few years. So it's simple to actually determine what real value should be rather than paying an extortionist price to
But besides the
that.
value, if there aren't any willing sellers, what do you do as a government knowing that you need to redress?
Well, the only process then would be to earmark where you would want to have the process go and then deal with expropriation. I mean, that would be the worst step to take, but that step exists. It's never been not there for the government to use.
Part of the criticism, Mr. Mahanjan, is that the government has given land in the past to black farmers who have done nothing with the land. It has remained unproductive. Up to 95% was one of the statistics that I saw. 95% of the land that was given to black farmers has been unproductive. And Mr. Ngwinti said, no, it's now gone up to 27%. But it's still a very minute number of farms that are actually being productive. So if the minister then turns around and says, let's rather give this land to farm workers who in fact have the skill to be able to make the land productive, what could be wrong with that?
Well, I'm not sure about the term skill. Here we're talking about business skill, not the skill of just handling an animal or the skill of just handling a tractor.
But the government says, or the minister says, we'll take the money that we would have bought the land for and use the money to upgrade and upskill these farmers so that they can manage the farms.
I think, Mr. you must understand, whether the government gives the land to farm workers or to people who want to business in the land, at the end of the day, the proposal of the ministry is saying that I will continue to support both the current farm owner, who's having 50%, and the new owners, which will be the farm workers, 50%. Currently, that is why you say almost only 27% of the land that have been transferred up to date is productive. It's because the government never understand that land on its own without providing support cannot make somebody to be a successful farmer.
Isn't the money, though, the money that they will be put in this fund, going to be used for precisely that support?
This is what he's saying. This is what he's saying, that what he has been doing now is going to change and put this money exactly for the same thing. But what we have been saying, if you look at the history of land in this country and farmers in this country, right from the British takeover, farmers have been supported by the government. Not only in South Africa, all over the world, they are being supported even today. If you go to UK, farmers are being paid for producing. Farmers are being paid for exporting their commodities. But in South Africa, we don't do that. And personally, I don't think what the new proposal is gonna change anything in what government is currently trying to do.
Annelies, is there an acknowledgement, at least from the farmers that are part of your association, that there has been a problem here, that there is a need for redress, that there is a need to maybe get more of these farmers to sell their land in the willing buyer, willing seller arrangement? Or do you find that there's still resistance, people saying, these are our farms that we've owned for generations and we're not willing to part with them?
No, certainly there's an understanding, not only an understanding, but a willingness. And it's also in the interest of the farmers themselves. I think most farmers realize that if they want stability in the rural areas in the long term, we need to have land reform. But it needs to be sustainable land reform, and we also need to maintain food production in the process.
That sustainability, would it not be covered by having people that have worked on the land actually owning that land? In other words, the farm workers, as the minister is proposing.
No, unfortunately, we think the proposal is very naive in that respect, because you see, you get two different types of food security, really. You get what is referred to as household food security, where people produce just for their own consumption. And in some instances, the plight of farm workers would be addressed if they had a piece of land to basically grow their own food. But on the other hand, you have national food security. 50% of our population is urbanized. Those people all rely on getting their food from grocery stores. They go to Pick and Pay and Checkers and wherever to buy their food. And that food is produced by our commercial farmers. So by having a few farm workers produce food for their own consumption is not going to address the national food security problem.
Annelies,
So
what about a situation where you've got farm workers owning part of the land and actually producing not just for their own consumption, but for distribution elsewhere?
Well, there are a number of problems with that. First of all, you're trying to force the existing commercial farmer into a partnership now with the farm workers. Where that happens on a willing basis, and there are examples of that in terms of the old farm worker equity schemes, that certainly can work.
But why
if
not more
force
farmers doing that, though, voluntarily? If it's been seen to work elsewhere, why can't they replicate it?
Because government stopped the funding. The farm worker equity schemes operated on the basis that government bought shares in going commercial operations. Those shares were then transferred to the farm workers, and the idea was that the farm owners should transfer skills over time to the farm workers and that they would then be partners. And as I say, there are success stories in that respect, but then government pulled the plug on that specific program, and there was no longer any funding available.
Okay, we're going to take some of the Facebook messages after the break and also check out what you are saying on Twitter. Do keep those messages coming. We'll continue with this discussion right after this break. Welcome back. Let's just take a quick look at what you're saying on Facebook. Rekitais Chingwaro says, land policy destroyed Zimbabwe's economy. It's like giving someone a piece of mine or a piece of a mine without any machines to mine that mine. And Tebu Khomkoe says, I think the government should stick to the willing seller, willing buyer policy. Semiyu Rafiu says, it's one of the best policies ever in South Africa. It will reduce strikes, increase productivity as workers on the farms will feel like they're part of the process. Bongani Headbush Gobinga says, why not recall all the land to be in government control and then issue licenses according to usage? That's an interesting one. Matsubane Alfred Baloyi says, it does not make sense. 50% of the commercial farm is given to farm workers. Most of the farm workers are foreigners. So how are you addressing the problem? Those are just some of your messages on Facebook. Like I said, showing a mixed view because of the nature of what we are talking about. It is an emotive subject, but we have to address it because, like we were saying during the break, Johan, you've got two extremes. One is willing buyer, willing seller. And the other one is let's expropriate. Both of them are not working. Where is the middle ground? And like you said, it's a very difficult and complex issue. But looking at the paperwork, you would have to section the farm if this proposal were to work. You'd have to section the farm somehow. You'd have to get title deeds changed. You'd have to really work around the paperwork. Would it actually work if it were to be put in practice?
What caught my eye on the proposal when I wrote my article about it was it dealt with to acquire a share in the farm. Now, most farms are owned by a person, a farmer. And to acquire a share means to acquire 50% undivided share in the farm. That's how you acquire your right in title. And the government then pays into the fund, they say 50% of the value of the farm to be retained for the development of the person who now becomes the partner of the farmer. And that process in itself is then going to become complicated because the share in the farm is an undivided share. So who gets the house? Who gets the dam? Who gets the stables? You own everything undivided. So now you've got two partners with undivided shares. We're not even going to go to the point of what do you do with who lives where and whatever the situation is there. But farming is the window periods, and I'm not a farmer, so the agriculturists could assist me, but there are window periods when you need to plant and when you need to purchase cattle, etc. Now, I, as the one share owner, half share owner, says we have to plant in a week's time and we need R500,000. I'm putting in my 250. I need your 250 now. We need to purchase diesel, etc., etc. How fast can the government release those funds? That's just questions. How are you going to operate with, let's say there are 36,000 farms and each one has a half share owner. How fast is the government going to be able to release those funds to operate the farm, to produce from the farm? That's just a practical question. Never mind how the titles will work, because they talk about a 10-year period, a 25-year period, a 50-year period. Now, as you get to that period, you get a percentage share in the farm, 10%, 25%, 50%. And my question was, fine, we'll transfer those shares to the beneficiaries, but when they die, they might have 4 or 2 or how many ever children that then become part of their estate. So now you've got multiple owners who are going to have to farm the farm, because that's your entitlement. You own an undivided share in the farm.
And
that's
fact,
the problem I foresee.
Just adding on to that, you've also said that one of your issues with this proposal is that the security of the farmers could be threatened, in that they could be fired or, be chased. Farm workers, yes, be chased away from the farms, because the farmers are afraid that, all of a sudden they're going to take half of their land.
This is what has happened before when there was a new policy that the government, the ESTA, a lot of farm workers were chasing out of the farms when farm owners heard that the government is putting a policy of giving the farm workers the right to the land. They started, many farm workers now are staying in nearby townships and locations, and farm owners are even prepared to ferry these farm workers on a daily basis. But let me bring something else which many people don't understand. I don't agree with the view that there's not enough land which is on the market on a daily basis in South Africa. Studies have shown that almost every year, 5% of the land in South Africa is exchanging hands.
So is this land that you're saying the government should be picking up?
Exactly. 5% every year of the land which is the hands of the white farmers is being put on the market. If you can take that 5%, if government, that is our proposal. We have submitted this proposal to Mangaung. That government, for every piece of land which is getting into market, must be given the first option of refusal, so that whoever sells the land, government must be given the first option of refusal.
Just by the way, would this proposal apply to black farmers as well, this sharing with the farm workers? Or would it just be for white farmers?
Well, I don't know, because what it says, it says commercial farmers. That's why we say this thing is very, very unclear. And there was also another proposal which was coming via the National Development Plan, NDP, which was not the same as this one. They were talking about trying to organize the commercial farmers at a district level, and those commercial farmers will identify land that could be put into the market, and they will also contribute. Okay. I think the white farmers were very keen to follow that, though it was also not very clear. I think the person who proposed, Mohammed Karan, is still also trying to explain how this thing is working. But what we are saying, government had a target of 30%, which it was supposed to be, that 30% be finished in 2009. Government didn't meet the target in 2009. He shifted that target to 2014, which is this year.
Let me take that question then and pose it to Annelies in closing. Annelies, the problem here is these two extremes. The willing buyer, willing seller model is clearly not yielding results if we go by what Mr. Manjane has just said. On the other hand, we don't want to go the extreme route of expropriating the land. How do we find the middle ground? What do we do? Very quickly, please.
Look, I think there is middle ground to be found, and I think using the carrot rather than the stick is something that can work. Having incentives for farmers to participate on a voluntary basis on things such as the National Development Plan proposals, bringing back these farm worker equity schemes, looking at sustainable off-site villages. And then in some instances, government will have to resort to expropriation, but that should be a measure of last resort.
But why should
there
the farmers
should really
be
be a range of options.
incentivized? Why should the farmers be incentivized to do the right thing? Why can't your organization, for example, tell them it is the right thing to do? Give some of the land to the farm workers. Share what you have.
Look, farming is a business, and the farmers need to survive financially. And contrary to popular belief, most farmers are not wealthy. Many farmers don't even make enough money to be required to be registered for VAT. So it's a struggle for them as well. There are bigger farmers who can make a contribution and who are doing so. Many of them simply cannot do so.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much to all of my guests for joining us for this discussion. Thank you very much for participating. Remember that we keep the conversation going on our Facebook page, Interface on SABC3, or on Twitter. Good night.